maybe whilst we're waiting, if we can just get a brief sense of where people are at. Like, are you a job seeker? Are you looking for your first internship? Are you a graduate? So whoever wants to talk, feel free to unmute yourself.
Happy to get started. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Akram. I was working as a production and a project engineer for about 3 years up until the start of this year, and then I took pretty much a break and did a software engineering bootcamp, which I've just recently finished. So that's me trying to, I guess, transition into tech and just trying to familiarize myself with other Muslims in tech, especially. And yeah, nice to meet you all.
Likewise, Akram. Alaikum salam. Where are you based?
I'm in Melbourne.
You're in Melbourne, okay.
Yep.
Nice.
Is this sort of like a primarily Sydney-based group or not really?
No, there's more of us in Melbourne than in Sydney. So
Nice.
yeah. We've got about, I think, 300 members in Melbourne and only about 75 in Sydney. So
Mashallah. It's very unfortunate for Sydney people, but yes.
yeah, inshallah, we're working on it. Okay, cool. Anyone else?
Yeah, hi. Assalamu alaikum. This is Riaz. I am joining from Los Angeles.
Oh, wow.
And
Nice to meet you.
yeah, it's Saturday evening for me. It's Sunday morning for you guys over there.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in software for a very long time, 3 decades actually. And recently I was laid off and I'm finding it tough to find a job. So I thought I should actually use this time to upgrade to the newer technologies. So that's what I'm doing.
Very nice. And how did you find out about this event, brother Riaz?
I don't know. I got a link on a WhatsApp. And when I found it, I said, whoa, I need to attend this. And that's what I did. I will look.
Yeah, go on. Hello?
Yeah, I can't find the link. I don't know where it is. I don't know who sent it to me, but it just came.
Nice. And this WhatsApp group is like an American-based WhatsApp group, people in the US?
Oh, it's a local community WhatsApp group. I mean, everybody in the city of or northern Los Angeles area collaborate and help each other out.
MashaAllah. That's very good. Okay. Khair, inshallah. Thank you very much for that. And thank you for joining us from Los Angeles.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Okay. Anyone else?
I guess I'll go. Assalamu alaikum.
Salam.
My name is Abdurrahman and I'm based in Sydney, first year uni student, so I might be a little bit younger than everyone else here. So essentially I joined because I know that I'm interested in the tech industry, but a lot of people, they ask, once you tell them that, okay, you're doing this course, this engineering course, they ask, okay, what do you want to do? What industry do you want to get into? And I've never really been able to answer the question, as I don't really have any particular interest into one industry or not. So I decided to join this meeting, hopefully to get some ideas on how I could progress further as I'm doing my degree.
Very nice. I think we met at the UNSW event, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I remember. So,
no, good on you. Like you're a forward-thinking first year, that's for sure. I definitely wouldn't have had the wit to join events like this when I was in first year. Good on you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Anyone else? We'll go one more and then we'll start with intros. Anas, Ashraf, and there's, I don't know who back is.
Assalamualaikum. Am I audible?
Now you are.
Yes. I mean, personally, for me, the reason why I joined would be to get insights, I would say. I'm personally interested in tech. I mean, biotech is my niche, but in general, I'm interested in tech. And, I would say, like, no matter what field anybody is from, they should be, integrated with knowledge from tech. Because the way the world is heading, we all need to be, somewhat knowledgeable about tech to implement it in our own fields and our own, careers and wherever we are going. So, and yeah, mashallah, the brother who is gonna be, leading the event, he is really out there, and the insight and information, like in general, that I can gain from him would be, immensely helpful for me. So yeah, that's why I'm here and looking forward to the event.
All right. Jazakallah khairan. I think we can make a start. So first of all, Assalamu alaikum and welcome everyone. I'm Rashid. I'm the founder of Muslims in Tech, and I'm happy to have you on this Sunday morning and for Riaz, Saturday evening. Thank you for making it. So essentially, just a brief about Muslims in Tech. So Muslims in Tech is been made to provide a platform for Muslims in tech to be able to network, help each other out, mentor each other, and ultimately, if we're looking at a mission and a vision for the organization, it's to be the Muslim YC. And that's why we started with a talent pool, and in amongst that talent pool, we have engineers, data scientists, machine learning engineers, and founders. And from there, we hope to build a community that can pretty much spit out startups and founders and companies, and we build like a perpetual feedback loop that continues to feed itself and be self-fulfilling. So from there, just in terms of this event, Brother Faraz has been kind enough, to give us some of his time, especially in his busy schedule, to help us run this careers AMA. So if you're not familiar with the concept of an AMA, it's an Ask Me Anything. I think he started out on Reddit. They'd get, technology leaders or whatever to get up there, and pretty much the crowd would ask them any questions they had. And they would have to answer. I think Google also has like a long-standing tradition of this, where they had like I think they also call them all hands, company all hands, where they pretty much the founders would go up and they'd just get drilled with questions from employees, and they'd have to answer them. So this is essentially a similar concept, but for careers. If you're looking for an internship, you're switching, you're just looking for a new gig, or you're interested in learning from Brother Faraz, then welcome and thank you for being here. But with that, I'll just give a brief intro and bio into Brother Faraz first, and we'll go from there, inshallah. So Brother Faraz has been working in the software industry for over 18 years. He's worked as an engineer, he's led teams, and he's led and worked part of numerous multidisciplinary teams. I remember him telling me, big fan of building big distributed systems, and there's probably no better place to be than AWS and Amazon for that. And his aim is to help create leaders in the industry and guide individuals like us on the challenges and opportunities in software. So before we get into questions, Brother Marjan's uploaded the Slido link in the chat. And that's how we'll be addressing questions. It's a simple service to use. So what you do is you go there, you write your question in, and the questions that are most popular. So you can like upvote questions, because often we have similar questions. So if you like it, you upvote it, and the ones that get upvoted the most will most likely get asked. So make sure you go there and ask your questions there, and reserve the chat for I don't know if there's no sound or stuff like that. Just brother Faraz, we can get you to give like a brief bio of your own as to how you got to today, and then we'll start with questions, inshallah. I might start us off.
Yeah, sure. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Out of all the things that that I'm not really good at, I think introducing oneself is probably right at the top. So I'm glad that the brother Rashid has done the honors of giving a bit of an intro from my side. In general, in addition to what brother Rashid has said, I've worked across primarily the healthcare industry across my 18 years of experience, worked across 2 different countries. I graduated from Pakistan, worked there for approximately a decade before moving here to Australia. And actually, I actually used to live in Melbourne for approximately 8 years before I had to move to Sydney for the AWS role. The weather is much better here, is what I can tell you. Even though today is like, it's pretty Melbourne-esque here as well. Dark, gloomy, all rainy. But yeah, other than that, that's my, that's kind of the shortened intro from my side. I don't really, as you can imagine, with AWS and Amazon in general, distributed systems, we've got a lot going on at every single point in time, and as a result, there isn't a lot we can actually do outside of work. Prior to joining Amazon, I tried my hand, and brother Rashid knows this as well. I tried my hand at a few startups to see if we can get something happening. It didn't really work out at that point in time. We got away with a few learnings of our own. But yeah, since then I've been working at Amazon. I joined Amazon as part of their AWS networking side before moving on to AWS Redshift, which, if people don't know about that, it's a data warehousing component of Amazon. So yeah, that's a brief about myself.
Cool. I'll start us off with a question. And just a reminder, make sure, like, those that want to write questions, you go to the link in the chat, the Slido, and put your questions there. So you hire engineers, quite a bit, and you've been an engineer yourself. What are the things that engineers can do to best make a mark on, say, you as a hiring manager, for example?
So there are 2 parts to it, right? One is if your question is more around, let's say, for example, if I were hiring for engineers, and I get, let's say, 100 odd resumes, what makes it easier for me to go through that list, right? And then there's obviously, if you've got a team running, you've got 15, 20, 50 engineers, how do people stack up? So I'll try to answer both aspects of that. The first is, building the right resume is a skill that very few people have. And I think ever since I've been here in Australia, I've at least conducted, I would say, close to 300 interviews, and have gone through perhaps many more resumes. What often disappoints me to some extent is the amount of effort people put into constructing their resumes. I feel I regularly update my resume. It doesn't matter if I'm happy with my job, not happy with my job. I'll probably do a review once every 2 months, for example. And just basically, I've got a Git repo I'll just kind of, keep on updating my resume and then just pushing it to the Git repo so that I maintain the versions as well. There are often times where I kind of lose track of what changes I've previously had. And I've figured that people at times don't even do a basic spell check on their resumes. There's nothing more that turns off a potential hiring manager than to look at a resume with inappropriate spellings or with less than concise data about an individual. So there's something I call a 10-second test, right? It's a concept that you can actually leverage when you're building a web page, for example, or a website. When as a user, when you open up a website, it would take you less than 10 seconds to make an assessment of whether you want to stay on that website for long, right? And if you don't have the data that you're trying to look for, you'll move on to the next page or next website. It's a concept that works very well with Google as well. And when I say Google now, I feel like it's pretty outdated with ChatGPT coming onto the horizon. But there was a common saying that if you want to hide a dead body, page 2 of Google is the best place, right? Because no one actually goes there. So you've got page 1, people spend 10 seconds there looking at what they want. If they don't find it, they'll reconfigure their search statements. So and the same is true for your resume. If a hiring manager is looking at 100 resumes and they can't figure out what works for them, or if the candidate has got the most important, unique selling point at the top of their resume, they're going to put that away, unfortunately. It's something that I've noticed some of the recruiters do as well. And recruiters generally aren't really, they don't have the right insights. For most of the recruiters, at least that I've met, they don't have the right kind of insights into what the technology, technology domain is like. So what they'll do is a basic, search for keywords across a resume and then figure out, hey, this person's probably the right for this role because the keywords actually match up, without actually understanding the content. But again, coming back to the individual and a hiring manager, you've got to have that best thing that represents you right at the top. Now, I struggled with this a lot, right? When I came into Australia, it took me 3 months to land my first job. And that was after I had 8 years of manager experience back in Pakistan. And I looked at a lot of resumes across the board. And there was this one, classmate of mine who came to Australia around the same time, and he landed a job immediately. He got a couple of offers actually within his first week. And I had to look at his resume. One thing that caught my attention was he had all of these certificates, and he had the icons for those certificates right at the top, right? And it just looked good, right? And my resume was flat out, black, white, and there wasn't actually much, it's supposed to be a marketing, some kind of marketing pamphlet for you, right? And mine was just basically very, very orthodox or monotonous in some way. So what I did was, and I had like, I think 4 or 5 certifications, which I used to put right at the bottom, thinking that, all right, if people are interested, they're going to have a look at it. So what I started to do, very simple mechanism, as you can imagine, just picked up the official icons, moved them right to the top. And I immediately started to see the results, right? Very simple mechanism. I don't know why I couldn't think of that early on, but that worked. And from there on in, I started to think of everything as a hiring manager. If you look at a job role, it's immediately clear to you what the hiring manager or what the interviewer would be looking for. And is there a way for you to actually just preempt their questions and put them right at the top so that people can actually get what they want? And there's actually a funny story. It's a bit of a tangent, but I'll come back to the main points. When I started interviewing at Amazon, if people don't know, Amazon interviews are generally very robust, is a polite way of putting it. It takes around 7 rounds to get through as a successful candidate. And what happens is, it's every individual on the hiring loop, they come from a different background, right? They can be there could be managers, there could be engineers at different levels, there could be people from HR. You never know, right? So one thing I started to prep myself up for interviews is to go to the LinkedIn profile for each individual, right? And then try to figure out and preempt what kind of questions they would ask. And now I wasn't a pro at this, but I just figured, rather than actually going in, blindfolded almost in an interview and then finding out what that person really wants, what are some of the signals that I could actually pick up to preempt those questions. And I think that's probably one of the reasons I actually succeeded in clearing those interviews, because I could, looking at people's profile, I still remember, there was one manager who interviewed me, and I immediately knew that, his expertise was more around setting up teams, people management, agile methodologies. That is something that was, really almost my superpower in a way, right? So I knew that I could easily ace that. And I started off that conversation trying to focus on those points. Then there was one networking manager or networking engineer who was interviewing me, and networking isn't my area of expertise at all. So I had some ways to try to answer his questions and be more high level than kind of go into the deep side of things. So try to use, with the amount of information that we have got, we try to use as much signals that you can. And now coming back to the main point, the idea is, we as candidates, we often get very frustrated when we are looking for a job, right? And what we start to do is, we've got this one generic resume and a cover page, and then we start to almost spam all of these job ads that we see with the same cover letter and the same resume. Regardless of how frustrated you feel, I think what you've got to do is make sure that you can, as I said, make sure that you can somehow tailor your resume according to the asks of the role, so that people can actually see what you're bringing to their organization. Because remember, that's what they're going to be interested in, not how many skills you've got, how many other things you've worked on. So
just I want to follow up on that point, because you spoke about like knowing what the interviewers are looking for. So what did you do when it came to Amazon? How did you get that information? And then what kind of research did you do so that you were in the best shape to go into those interviews?
So see, a lot of the things for a lot of the companies, if they actually call you up for an interview, it means that they've actually seen you've got some of those skills that they want, right? And then the other part is, with companies like Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Atlassian, Canva, for example, there is a lot of information online, right? You can get information even around the kind of questions they would ask, what they're going to be looking for. And you just can't do enough practice, or there's just a lot more stuff. So basically, my point was, the first thing you should be doing is, how do you actually limit all of that so that you focus on the most appropriate thing for that particular interviewer. Now, you already know what Amazon's going to be focusing on, for example, but what is that particular interviewer going to be asking, right? And what my point was, to actually look at that candidate's profile, LinkedIn profile. The easiest way, you can have a look at their career progression, and it should give you some signals around what their area of expertise has been. Even if let's say if I were to give an example of a manager in Google versus a manager in Amazon, right? Generally, a manager in Google would be more hands-on. They'll be like an engineer, trying to roll up their sleeves where possible. And a manager in Amazon would be a 360-degree manager. They'll do everything from coding to from managing, from strategic discussions to everything else, right? Now you look at each of these profiles, and then you'll easily figure out, hey, this person, even though he's in Amazon, he or she is in Amazon, their area of expertise is probably just setting up teams and maybe making sure that the projects get delivered at the right time, right? And that because as individuals, we tend to have, especially on our LinkedIn profiles, and there are obviously exceptions from time to time, you will see people putting up things they're more passionate about, right? And if someone's passionate about setting up teams, you'll see that clearly laid out on their LinkedIn profile. Whereas if someone's really keen into rolling up their sleeves and opening up a terminal and just going deep into the Linux commands, you'll see that on their LinkedIn profile. So you'll exactly know where they're going to be focusing on. So again, you may not get it 10 out of 10 times, but I'm fairly sure you can actually get that 8 out of 10 times based on my experience.
Thank you very much. We've got quite a few questions here, so let's start rolling through them. So top one is, what's your best advice to someone looking to get an internship as a student?
All right, so as an internee, again, I think this is probably the other part that I was alluding to. You've got hundreds of candidates looking for internships every single year or every few months. It's important to stand out. Now, how do you stand out? One is having having good good results in your in your courses, for example, is one way. But being active and having having a way to let the recruitment teams know that you can almost hit the ground running. We've had in my experiences, we've had internees who, when you interview them, barely know how to type in some terminal commands, for example, right? And by that I don't mean that people need to absolutely memorize some of these commands. That's not what I mean. But you kind of get the gist of people when you talk to them and see how passionate they are about this the career they have chosen for themselves. And the only way to tell them about, to assess that passion, first up, is to see what they do in their free time. In their free time, obviously, we play games, we go out with family and whatnot. We've got our own separate life to live by. But how many, for example, open source projects have you taken part in? It obviously doesn't give you any monetary benefit, but when you go into open source projects and you can list them out on your resume, that adds a lot of value. Things like how active are you on GitHub, for example? How much activity can you show there? How many tools you have created, for example? How many I don't know how many. Again, it's just about the level of activity that you've got outside of your actual course outline that you've gone through. And that's what you want to, when you actually put your resume in front of anyone else, that's what people are going to look for, rather than, hey, I've just completed my master's degree or my undergrad degree and I've completed these many courses. That doesn't matter, because a lot of people actually do that, right? How do you stand out? Hey, if you compare that with someone who's completed their degrees or are in the process of completing their degree, and they've got tens of open source projects they've gone through, and you can have a meaningful conversation with them around technology, around architecture, for example, that enhances your chances of landing an internship many-folds. Now, I think one question that I can probably preempt is, how do companies actually offer internships, right? I think there's a lot of there are a lot of companies that advertise those internships, but there are a lot of companies who actually don't know how to go about that process as well. And I've seen that happen. And at times what happens is, as a hiring manager, when we always have to deal with this headcount issue. Companies have a limited budget. They probably don't want to have an additional headcount, because then letting people go comes with its own set of legalities and whatnot. So hiring an internee for tasks that are simpler, and they can be done by people who have just who understand the basics, is a bit of a no-brainer. But companies don't actually explore those options until you proactively reach out to them and ask them, hey, have you got an opportunity for an internee? So I'll encourage everyone to, again, in this instance, spam companies reach out to their HR departments and see if they've got any internship opportunities. And I think being proactive, being biased for action here is another signal that companies can potentially see as a positive factor, that you're doing your due diligence and reaching out to them instead of waiting for an opportunity to come on your table.
And you think reaching out to the HR departments is the best way to go about it?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely one way of doing it. Others is obviously there. A lot of the companies. I don't know if Amazon actually does this in Australia. We've done this in the past 2-3 years, but we've recently had a hiring freeze. So I know there's a lot of activity, school and college activity happening in the US side of things, where they've advertised for internees, and a lot of internees have come through, and then they go on to become permanent members of the team when they finish up their courses. So the bigger companies would all the time advertise for these opportunities, because we always take into account the headcount plus how much of the work can be done by hiring internees, and how much we can actually give back to the industry as well. It's the smaller companies that don't do that proactively, unless actually someone actually pings them and says, they'll kind of then get the sense that, all right, we can actually hire someone and help them grow and be useful for us in the future.
Cool. So this is the next question is similar, but now we're applying it to an international student in Australia, which we know comes with its own challenges. So I'm guessing a lot of it would be similar in the sense like having your GitHub profile and the tools and stuff, but then that extra hurdle of being an international student, do you have any advice in particular?
All right, so I've got some advice, but just a bit of disclaimer, right? I haven't actually gone into details of what specific hurdles an international student would face in general. So maybe take my advice with a pinch of salt there. And the reason I say that, the advice I got is perhaps on the struggles I had when I came in here, not as an international student, obviously. I came as a skilled migrant. But some of the things I saw, even when I had 8-9 years of management experience, some of the feedback I got from recruitment was around, hey, you need to understand the culture here, right? To be able to lead teams. Something that I would not really agree with even now, because to me that didn't make sense. I still think that if you are a good manager, you would be able to treat people as individuals rather than as a herd, really, that a lot of the managers tend to do. But I can well imagine that if I were to kind of extrapolate that experience onto international students, there would probably be similar concerns, right? As companies who perhaps may not have dealt with international students in the past, they would be concerned about how would international students gel into the teams, for example, right? Have they got any experience of working with teams in the past, working with diverse teams in the past? How is their communication skills, for example, right? And again, a lot of the time, I don't know if it comes across as a as a bit racist or not, but I've actually worked, because I've worked in Pakistan as well. One thing that's really typical of people coming from the subcontinent is that we never ask for clarifying questions, right? And if someone actually, and I've noticed this when I've worked with freelancers as well. If you give some task to people, they'll just sit back and say, hey, yes, I understand all of this, and they'll proceed to develop whatever they've understood, only to figure out that people have been on totally different wavelengths. So it's just a cultural thing, right? And I'm pretty sure there are cultural nuances in from different regions. So I think that's where the most concerns perhaps could arise. And again, I think what you need to preempt all of these challenges for the hiring teams, and then make sure that you cover up these bases. How can you actually cover up some of these bases? You don't have to work in an IT based company to get some experience, right? I remember when one of my friends came up to Australia. He was struggling. He was a professor back in Pakistan. He was struggling to land a role, and I asked him, "Hey, can you actually, if while you're not finding the right job in IT, can you just take a role at McDonald's, for example, right?" And what would that give you? That would give you something on your resume where you can say, hey, I've worked with diverse teams. I worked in some kind of pressure environment. I know how to deal with frustrated customers. There's no customer as frustrated as customers when they're hungry, right? So you've got something to show, right, as opposed to a blank piece of paper to give to people, right? So whatever you can do to preempt those questions is just whatever is in your hand. Try to get avail those opportunities as much as you can. So it doesn't have to be just limited. Don't limit yourself to IT. Just be proactive in trying to find the right opportunities to brush up those softer skills that people may want. And just again, just slightly going off on a bit of a tangent. In IT especially, people tend to downplay the role of communication skills, right? I've seen absolutely brilliant engineers shoot themselves in the foot because they struggle to communicate, right? Intrinsically, what we want is to put up our headphones and sit in front of the machine and get that machine to do what we want, right? That's what our comfort zone is. But then when we have to do the same, when we have to step out of that comfort zone and start talking to people and make them understand our point of view and understand their point of view, that's where we struggle, and it's a struggle I've gone through as well. More so because I was a manager, right? The sooner you get over this hurdle, the better you would be in your career, right? So don't underestimate the power of communication skills. And on the flip side, I've seen average engineers with absolutely fantastic communication skills go far ahead in their careers, and that's true in Amazon as well. Even with all the robust process we've got, people who don't have very developed communication skills, they tend to struggle.
Very good. All right. So being proactive, having a profile, improving communication skills. Another one I've heard from a few people is they start working something like a call center. They often work in a call center because call centers, you can imagine, everyone loves to hate the person calling from a call center. So you deal with people at their worst, and you get pretty good at conflict resolution as well. So, and it's even for sales, I think it's normally pretty good too. And sales is a fantastic skill to have going through life in general. All right. Next question is about the Australian job market. So you did mention cuts. Amazon, we've seen, I think the news has been full of big companies with job cuts. So how are you seeing the Australian job market at the moment when it comes to, say, engineers in general or the tech sector?
So generally, what I've noticed is the Australian market tends to follow the American market for some very weird reason. I mean, we've obviously got Amazons and the Googles and Microsofts here, but whenever a recession happens in US, it has some kind of trickle effect, and companies start to do much more of that in Australia. But luckily, I think we recover quickly as well. I think it's been around 6 months since the hiring freeze was initiated at Amazon, and my gut feel is it's going to open up fairly soon. I do know that companies like Atlassian, for example, they after 2 or 3 months of Google and Amazon, letting go of people or announcing layoffs, Atlassian started to do the same as well, but they've recovered. They've started hiring. The reason I know that is because I've been approached by a couple of folks from Atlassian, and I was a bit surprised that they've recovered quicker. Just so everyone knows, Amazon share prices have started to recover as well. So, as a result, we will see that open up. Again, the market here in Australia, I think is fairly good in terms of job roles. Even though, as I said, we saw a dip, I'm fairly sure it's going to come up in the next couple of months.
Awesome. The next one, actually, I want to get to this one because we don't have much time. So Akram asks, what's your journey been like as a Muslim in tech? And do you have any advice for navigating the industry as a practicing Muslim?
Oh, that's a brilliant question. Thank you for asking me that. Yeah, I mean, it's been an interesting journey. So maybe I'll give you some more insight into that, because I actually, when I started my first role, I was very, very nervous. I didn't have my beard that you see here, so I was clean shaven at that point in time. But just finding places to pray. I actually worked in a very small company, and I think I was the first Muslim in that company. So people actually didn't know what it was all about. And when we used to go out for lunches, I was like, hey, do these guys actually have halal? And they're like, what's halal all about? And then I had to kind of go in depth trying to explain to them, hey, no, we don't eat pork. We have our meat in a different way and whatnot. And to be fair, people it was a bit of an educational experience, both for me and I believe for that company as well. Because, at the start, obviously it was a struggle. I used to, hop out for a toilet break and then, pray in the parking lot, for example, or in my car, for example. But then gradually, as I started to warm up to the culture, I started to be very upfront about the whole thing. I figured, someone once gave me very pertinent advice, and it was in Urdu, so I'll try to do my best to translate that. And that was around, if you do any negative thing, but you do it with all the as in you do it very vocally, people would start to think it's the right thing. But if you do anything that's positive and you hide it from people, they'll actually think you're doing something wrong, right? I don't know if I actually did justice to this advice, but what I started to do was I started to become very upfront about my beliefs. And when I joined any new company, I would just let them know, hey, I need to be away for the Jummah prayer, for example, or I've got explicit halal requirements, for example. When people organize lunches, I just excuse myself from time to time, saying that no, I don't want to be a hurdle in your lunches. I'll have my own lunch, but because of XYZ, I do take that as an opportunity to educate people as well, and not come across as someone who would just go like, hey, no, I'm not going with you guys because I'm a Muslim and I do XYZ. But I take that as an opportunity to educate people, because they want to know, people want to know why we do certain things. And what even at times, if it doesn't even help you, in the future, it would help other people who join a certain company. I know the first company I reached out to, I needed a reference from my manager in that company when I joined Amazon. And I reached out to him. I said, hey, his name was Andrew. And I said, hey, Andrew, I hope you remember me. And his first response was, of course I remember you. You're the one who taught me about halal. And I'm like, all right, cool, that sounds good. So, just be upfront about your beliefs. Once you're upfront, maybe a couple of times people would actually see, would be concerned, but they'll eventually warm up to that idea. They'll understand why you do certain things, and then the navigation becomes so much easier, as opposed to people not knowing where you are three times a day while you are at work. And they'll probably feel that you're slacking off or doing whatnot. Just let them know these are my requirements. If I'm taking 15 minutes away or 30 minutes away in total out of my daily work, I'll put in 30 minutes extra, right? So it's no harm to the business. And again, across multiple companies, I haven't seen anyone being fussed about that. Prayer rooms, I think, have become more common as well across companies. So that's even less of a problem now, and especially in the major cities, right? Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, Perth. People are, because of the influx of migrants, people are more aware of the requirements now. So yeah, I think absolutely, and don't let any of that. One of my biggest fears was when I was trying to figure out, hey, do I need should I actually keep a beard? Because would that be a detriment to my to my growth, to my career growth? I just dived into it, and I said, if someone doesn't want me because I've got a beard, that's their problem. That's not my problem, right? And trust me, ever since I've been, I've had this beard, and I'm not saying I'm very, pious or anything. Ever since I've grown this beard, I felt that my career is actually just, taken off in some ways. So I was in a small company, then I, got hired in Telstra Health. I made my way quickly up to as a senior manager in Telstra Health, and then I joined Amazon. So it's never been a hurdle at all. But I've just made sure that I along the way, I educate as many people as possible on why we do certain things. Good question. Thank you.
All right. So this one, answer as best you can, but the question is relating to cybersecurity in Australia, the cybersecurity industry. And I don't know, maybe you can comment on it, but someone's saying, is it worth it for aspiring students?
Right. So, yeah, again, disclaimer, I've not got a lot to do with the security side of things, although I interact with those teams quite often. A generic advice would be, don't measure everything in monetary terms, right? Everything in IT is very, very challenging. You'll, in your career, multiple times, you'll get stuck, right? The only thing that will get you over the line is going to be your passion for that, for the work you do. If you're interested in security or cybersecurity, and if you're really passionate about it, just dive into it. There's no shortage of opportunity for experts in any area, right? So, and if you're passionate about something, you'll be an expert in no time. But if you're not passionate about something and you try to go into an area where you think the monetary benefits are high, there's a high likelihood that you might end up failing. And I've seen, security is such a niche area that you'll find dearth of experts in security. You'll find people, for example, when a lot of companies were transitioning to cloud, for example, and there still are, people just don't understand. The security experts perhaps don't really understand how cloud technology, for example, works, right? And I had interaction with a lot of security professionals who were stuck in their, security of the 1990s, for example, on how we should build websites and how they should be behind VPNs, for example. Imagine having a website in today's time behind a VPN when you have to access it. You've got to be, if you're passionate, you'll understand what it needs, what it would take for you to be always at the forefront of your area, right? But if you're not passionate, you'll easily let go of all of that. In any field in IT, it's, if you compare it with something like medicine, for example, and I don't mean to downplay the medical experts, but my wife is a doctor, and we keep on having this debate about, hey, how it's so hard to be an IT professional versus how hard it's to be a medical professional. And one thing I keep on telling her is that once you become a medical professional, you probably don't have to go back to your books again. Whereas 6 months, if we don't, if we get outdated in terms of technology, that's a long time being behind in terms of technology. And that's the case for security as well. And the only thing, again, that takes you there, that keeps you right at the top, is your passion. If you're passionate, you'll keep on learning, and learning isn't just taking courses. You'll read our articles, you'll come up with hypothetical situations, you'll try to kind of be biased for action and implement some of those scenarios in your role. For example, you wouldn't be satisfied with the status quo of how things are functioning, and you'll always look at, how can I do better? How can I do better? And the only way you can do that is if you've got passion for your field.
That's a good segue actually into the next question, because the next one is talking about how a lot of people are feeling a sense of uncertainty because of AI and all the latest LLMs, and how they what kind of changes they're going to cause to careers, especially software engineering or any kind of technical careers. So they're asking, what do you think is the best way to deal with this kind of uncertainty, and what's your opinion on the matter?
So job roles are going to change, right? There's no two ways about it. But they're not going to change, all of a sudden that you get up one day and you're like, hey, all the software engineers are fired because, hey, you've got a new AI. That's not going to happen, right? Job roles change over a period of years, if not decades. And what I figured out is, especially for people who are into core software engineering, I don't see a way how that would be obsolete. That would become obsolete, because you need people who can come up, who would come up with these algorithms. For example, yes, I mean, you can call them data engineers or data scientists or whatever the new fancy term is. But if people don't understand how to, program these algorithms, who's going to do that? Yes, ChatGPT, for example, or tools like ChatGPT can give you some high-level code snippets that you can use in your code. I do that from time to time, for example, but it's not going to give you a solution to those problems, right? You'll always need, again, I'm talking more about the software engineering side. You'll always need software engineers. I don't foresee software engineers disappearing in the next 10-20 years. Maybe I'll be proven wrong. I don't know, but that's my gut feeling, right? The good thing about any roles disappearing, is in this transition period, you'll have to diversify yourself anyways. There is no way you can't, gone are the days when we could think of, where our forefathers, for example, would spend 30, 40, 50 years in a job role and just retire from the job they had actually taken up when they started their careers. You'll always need to diversify your skills. It's much like any product that you see. You pick up any product from the market. It doesn't have an infinite lifetime. Some people may argue, hey, products like Coca-Cola, for example, that's been around for some time. But it may have a long plateau, but at some point in time, you'll notice that Coca-Cola then tries to diversify itself by having no sugar options, having different tastes, for example. So you'll have to diversify yourself. And that's very true for skills as well. You wouldn't be stuck into this one area and think of retiring from that area. You'll figure out as you move along, you'll figure out new things. You'll figure out something else that excites you. And then you'll start to diversify your skills. Companies would give you opportunities. Let me give you an example. So, small to medium scale companies, when this hype around data science came into the fore, how many small to medium sized companies do you know that started to immediately hire data scientists, right? I can't think of any company that I knew of. What they did do, most of the companies that I know of, is they asked their software engineers to say, hey guys, anyone is interested in doing data science stuff? How about, just build us some nice, cool things here. And people who were interested in data science then started to transition into those roles, right? And that's how you transition into that role. So it's not, you should never feel concerned about this, because the companies that you work for, if they want to diversify their products, they'll actually bring up these opportunities and instead look for people who can help them diversify their products internally, rather than immediately hiring 10, 15 people from outside and then spending a lot more money without knowing what they actually want, what the goal is going to be, ending up spending a lot more money otherwise. So yeah, my advice would be, don't let that hassle you. Just look at what your area of interest is right now. Perfect if it aligns with how where the industry is going. That's perfect, and jump onto the bandwagon.
Perfect. So just one last one. We've kind of touched on it already, but I think it's a good point to end on. And what advice have you got in terms of customizing your resume do you have for entry-level candidates?
For what candidates, sorry?
Entry-level, so people looking for internships, graduates and stuff.
Is that related to any, I'm assuming, software engineering side of things, most likely?
We can make that assumption, yeah.
So yeah, basically, again, put yourselves, whenever you've got to make that decision, I think one good skill to have is try to put yourselves in the person's shoes who's actually going to be reviewing that resume. And you'll immediately see that if you've got hundreds of resume coming onto your desk, all of them would probably have done the same kind of courses. So, as a hiring manager, how do I differentiate between these hundreds of resumes? What would help you stand out? And as I pointed out early on, it's, you've got to find out ways of reflecting your passion onto your resumes. And some of the mechanisms I've already identified, such as if you've got any additional certificates, put them on top. If you've got any additional internship experience, lay that out nicely at the top. If if you're looking for a specific job, let's say that, for example, in IT, if you're looking at a consulting job, for example, to start off with, it's mostly around how do you manage pressure situations. So maybe highlight, hey, I've managed XYZ pressure situations because perhaps you were the team lead for your final year project, and then or perhaps you had another job at, for example, McDonald's, for example, where you were leading the team, and there were certain rush hours, for example, and if if you figure out that a company is more interested in innovation, for example, you can highlight, hey, I figured out a problem by myself, and then I came up with a solution for that problem by myself, right? So how to just try to preempt ways of standing out from the crowd. Not a lot of people actually do that, right? They'll just go in and figure out that, hey, someone's going to figure out that this person's probably better than others. How can you actually help out the hiring manager in figuring out you're better than others? So yeah, again, think of various mechanisms on how you can make that happen. One thing again, I think people don't realize the value of LinkedIn. Have a look at different LinkedIn profiles. There are some LinkedIn profiles, even for experienced professionals, that will stand out. What makes them stand out? Think of that. Yet another thing is, very deep into my career, one of my managers gave me advice around improving my writing. Now, if people know some things about Amazon, is that we've got a very writing heavy culture. We do everything in writing. We don't have PowerPoint slides. We write, what we call 1-pagers or 3-pagers or 6-pagers, and our writings are very, very, very concise. Everyone should focus on making sure that their writing is up to the mark. And what do I mean by that? Imagine this: if you've got an idea that you can express in a paragraph, versus the same idea you can express in a line, you should actually go with the latter, right? Because again, the hiring manager would probably not want to read that paragraph. The hiring manager can quickly read that line and get an idea of that, of what the candidate is like. So invest time in making sure. And how do you actually do that? It's a very simple skill to develop. Just revisit your writing a day after you've written something, right? And the next day you'll start to figure out and keep on cutting down words and figuring out, hey, is it still giving me the same idea? Keep on cutting down those words until you get the very minimum number of words that can express the same idea that you had initially. It takes a bit of effort at the start, a bit of discipline, but you get there, and it's very valuable. So yeah, coming back to that original point, just preempt, folks, preempt and see how you can get your best skills right at the top. And if you figure you haven't got those skills, work on those skills. Obviously, it's fairly easy. If you're looking at, for example, open source projects, if someone's wanting to show how good they are in terms of engineering skills, look at the, ask ChatGPT what the most, what the best open source projects are in C# or Java or whatever. Pick some of those up, try to, get them running on your local machine, make changes, fix some bugs, get things happening. I think that there's nothing, especially for software engineers, there's nothing better than that on your resume.
And lucky last, because it came in and got upvoted. If you could go back in time, what's one piece of advice you'd give yourself?
Communication skills. Yeah, that's probably, as I pointed out earlier, it's probably one of the things that I've been very reluctant to develop myself. And as I moved into a manager role, it just became extremely important. I still love, even after 18 years of working in the industry, I still love to put on my headphones, just focus on what I have to do on my machine. And I almost, I hate meetings so much, but I have to spend 90% of my time just in meetings, talking to people every single day. It's an absolute, you'll run into, I've realized that you'll run into, there would be a time where your career would just stall just because you can't get your ideas across. And other people, there's actually a very interesting anecdote here as well. I had a colleague who actually was 10 years younger than me, and her background she was a cashier at LD, right? Her communication skills were absolutely fantastic, and she actually managed to leapfrog me in one of the roles that we were both vying for. And mostly because she had really fantastic communication skills. So I've witnessed this firsthand. We all of us need to have really, really good communication skills. It's we need to be really clear on what the inputs are that are required for our roles. We need to be very clear on the outputs are that we are targeting. The more clearer things are, the easier it becomes for you in your career.
Cool. I think you've given me an idea for some kind of communication skills workshops for engineers, but I'm sure we can flesh that out in future. But we'll wrap it up there. Thank you very much, Faraz, for joining us today. Thank you all for coming along and for contributing with your questions. As I've put in the chat, if you benefited, and you want to hear from more people like Faraz, you'll be able to speak to them and, reach out to them directly. Share our form with your friends and others that you know. And yeah, thank you for coming along. And inshallah, this is recorded. So we'll send out a link of the recording and you can share that too so that other people can benefit. Thank you all for coming along and I hope you enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Assalamu alaikum.